A lot of One Piece fans tend to overlook the East Blue events, and, in particular, its villains as little more than setup for later events, or view the main villains as mediocre beyond the effect they have on the Straw Hats. I'd honestly go against the notion though and say its major villains are some of the most well written in the manga in terms of their narrative and thematic role in the central story arc. The antagonists of One Piece's arcs tend to fall into one of four categories. Those written well enough in their narrative role and characterization, those who do not have the most well-rounded personality but serve a good narrative or thematic role, those whose character writing acts as a redeeming quality of an otherwise flawed story arc, and those that are simply poorly handled. I'd say the four major pirate threats of East Blue fall into either category 1 or 2 for reasons I'll go into. Alvida doesn't count as a major one when she only served as a punching bag to introduce Kobe. With all of them being linked by the common idea of representing different ways one can fail to hold on to their ambitions, and what Luffy needs to avoid in order to succeed in becoming Pirate King. The first and most prominent to the series' overarching narrative is of course Buggy. Even leaving aside everything revealed after entering the Grand Line, we know Buggy was on the same crew and of the same rank as Shanks, but the latter rose to be a rival to Mihawk who scares Seekins, whereas Buggy isn't even the most wanted man in East Blue, whose control extended to only a small town. Unlike with another villain we'll get to, this isn't out of complacency though, with Buggy being more than willing to go to the Grand Line after Logetown, and was likely trying to build up his manpower for the journey. We see through these elements that Buggy is someone unwilling to stay in Shanks' shadow, just like Luffy, with the key difference being their confidence in taking the steps to doing so. Whereas Buggy tried to keep government heat off his back by forming his own crew and going after low-hanging fruit, Luffy constantly aims upwards with the bravery to not fear the government, with his ideology of a pirate king being one who is free, as opposed to a coward scared of his own past. It's also no coincidence that not only is Buggy the first devil fruit enemy Luffy faces in the main story, but a fruit that is the opposite of Luffy's. The Bara Bara no Mi makes swords useless but can be affected by blunt force attacks, whereas what we knew as the Gomu Gomu no Mi can take almost any external blunt force not backed up by haki, but can be injured by cuts and sharp stabs. Even recent reveals of the latter fruit add to this, with Nika's ability to bring unity being the opposite of separation, with it being fitting Buggy's loss in Orangetown is one brought by his body being tied down and united in a comedic way. On the subject of comedy, Buggy's design and personality is a perfect representation of One Piece, in seeming as goofy as a clown can be with his look and reaction to things such as hearing the word nose, but displaying a darker image in the right scenario, more in line with the killer clown trope, and linking heavily to the insidious nature of One Piece's world beneath the flashy surface. Some may have also caught on that Buggy's role here as keeping off the radar while building himself up is much like what Crocodile would do in the next major arc after East Blue, with comparisons between East Blue and Grand Line villains being something we'll go into further soon. Buggy vs Luffy also shows us the different ideas pirates can have towards treasure, with Buggy being solely interested in monetary gain, whereas Luffy's treasure are objects or people whose value is their emotional relevance. Next is Kuro, perhaps the most unconventional of all of One Piece's antagonists, other than maybe Katakuri, by wishing to leave the stresses of a pirate's life, and find one of comfort by taking Kaya's inheritance. The most comparable antagonist to Kuro in any other shonen work would be Kira Yoshikage from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right down to both being associated with cats. Might have been what inspired him with how much Oda loves JoJo. Possible inspirations aside, Kuro is a man whose pirate goals have proven futile, to the extent he chooses to abandon it entirely rather than change course on how to achieve his goals, as with later villains, making it no surprise Luffy shows such disdain for him, in Kuro showing that Luffy's success must come from him not giving up on his dreams, or giving in to claims of futility, even when at his breaking point, something spanning from as overarching as his dream to be the Pirate King, to belief in such things shines as an island in the sky. Luffy's natural instincts and improvisation best in the man of 1,000 plans also stands out as almost an embodiment of Oda's writing philosophy, in his plan for One Piece running for 5 years being expanded or drawn out for decades as he thought out more details of the world and characters, much as Kuro's actions didn't go as planned. Also, to quote Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth, or headbutted in the face in this case. Kuro is also someone willing to play the role of Klahadore while biding his time, that add to his frustration in building a hatred towards Kaya, whereas Luffy's ideals of freedom act in opposition to restraining himself, and allowing him to further hone his power, that at its core is the power of living freely. It is also worth talking about how Kuro relates to Usopp, when the latter is the Straw Hat with the most emotional ties to facing him, whereas Usopp's lies end whenever his pirate father's worth is called into question. Kuro's status as a pirate is what he's willing to lie about, to the extent of constructing a whole new life. As I've said before, Don Krieg's character is one of the most one-dimensional antagonists in the entire manga, with his whole character being, "I'm the strongest there is," after having just come back from Mihawk's reality check. And he has the least amount of emotional ties to the Straw Hats of any of East Blue's major villains, with Gin having more character drama attached to him at Baratie. It's a testament to the consistent quality of East Blue though, that even such an individually uninteresting villain ties into the bigger ideas of the East Blue arc, with his focus on building up his military being an antithesis of Luffy's ideals of a crew. There's obviously quality over quantity, with Luffy's desired team of 10 having now become a Yonko crew, and his 2, 3 or 4 crew members at Baratie, depending how you categorize it, being far more effective than Krieg's armada of jobbers, with only Gin and Pearl with his armor having any relevance even by East Blue standards. But the more meaningful difference is in Krieg's armada being disposable pawns, as opposed to each of Luffy's nakama being precious to him even if a ship. Krieg can be compared to Gecko Moria, who went further in making his subordinates tools of his ambition, which led to what's easily the best team effort in the manga thus far, in all the Straw Hats working in sync to defeat he and Oars. The Baratie segment of the East Blue arc also has a focus on dreams and ambition, overcoming what's deemed inconceivable, made very apparent with Krieg's supposed invincible weapons being outdone by Luffy's spear to the heart. Finally, there's East Blue's strongest pirate antagonist in Arlong. It's fitting he appears in the section of East Blue after Mihawk's Frog in the Well line, because Arlong is the most obvious example of these four of a big swordfish in a small pond, bullying the humans of East Blue to feed his ideas of fishman supremacy, that he'd be unable to keep up with going back to the Grand Line. Yes, he did seem to have the desire to conquer all the seas through Nami's navigation, but with him being aware of the powers of humans such as Kizaru, it was at best him thinking of targeting small villages there and bribing marines with his plunder, or being about as genuine about this as his deal with Nami at worst. Arlong's actions are those of someone willing to resign themselves down to a difficulty below his level to secure his ego, as opposed to Luffy striving further beyond his level, and what incidents of marines letting things slide he accomplishes are due to his actions that aid the greater good. The bigger aspect of Arlong as a foil to Luffy's ideals though, ties into his philosophy on his crew and species. Arlong is the only pirate villain in East Blue not to view his crew as expendable pawns, and shows great rage at harm coming to them much like Luffy. The difference though comes in what freedom he provides them, with him doing what he can to keep Nami part of it no matter what she wants, whereas Luffy would have let her go if he genuinely believed her desire to leave, and later events of Nakama leaving have him get the truth out of them through words unless they bring things to blows. This acts as the emotional core of their fight, and what makes Luffy's declaration that Nami is his Nakama a truly powerful moment. Arlong's ideology is expanded through another later threat, but in a more transparent way than the others, with his thoughts of superiority being carried by Hody Jones, who acts as a hollow mouthpiece of racial rhetoric, which add into Fishman Island's themes. I may go deeper on them in a later video, but the relevant point to this Luffy comparison is that Luffy is far more someone of equity, who refutes Arlong's legacy, which in turn is a challenge to the Tenryubito's own ideology, with Luffy offering the equal rights to equal fights approach to both. Another comparable New World villain to Arlong some may not consider is Doflamingo, in him also having a strong care for his family, and also tying into those ideas of superiority in being the second least conventional Tenryubito family, but also taking both a darker and more mature take to family than Luffy, with him executing Rosinante for his betrayal for the sake of his family, whereas Luffy is far more idealistic on his views of family faults. The desire to aim higher, the will to live a dangerous life, care for one's crew, and respect for their own ambitions. It's by embodying or honing these traits that Luffy defeating all four of these pirates is an ideological battle to prepare him for the Grand Line, and the reason why they are all excellently handled within the narrative of One Piece's first major arc. Thank you if having watched to the end. I'm not sure when I'll create more One Piece videos, but I do have quite a few in mind. It would mean a lot if you'd subscribe so you don't miss them, and if interested in analyses on Dragon Ball and a few other series, check the rest of the channel out. Until then, I'll see you next time.